I will and do watch pretty much any true crime documentary going. But when there's one that's out about a case that I'm already familiar with, I always approach it in two ways. The first is being quite, I guess excited is the wrong word, but being curious about how this documentary will approach this case, because when I've seen other documentaries about it, I wonder if it's going to be unique or a different perspective. The other side is that I'm concerned that it's not going to give any new information and it won't shed any light that we don't already know. The abduction of Millie Dowler on Channel 5 is, for the right reasons, a breath of fresh air, because this is the first time that I've seen a documentary about her disappearance and where there are two different focuses, and actually where there's not that much focus on the killer. I should point out that she was actually murdered. It is called The Abduction of Millie Dowler. She was murdered in 2002 by Levi Belfield, and I won't mention his name again. I will refer to him as the killer, because I don't believe he should have his name spoken. People who kill should not become, immortalized because of their actions, and unfortunately a lot of killers do, I say a lot, some serial killers do commit these murders because they want the notoriety. So I'm not going to give him the satisfaction of saying his name again. This documentary looks partly about the investigations that the police did at the time, because initially she was just abducted. They didn't know, of course, that there would be a body. And I think this is the first time I've seen a documentary about Dowler where they actually used footage from the time. Because usually I'm watching an episode of a bigger documentary series and she's just the focus of one episode, and the episodes, for whatever reason, have never really had that much at their disposal. But with this Channel 5 documentary, we get to see interviews with her parents at the time and her best friend. And I have to say, massive credit to her best friend, who was, I think, 12 or 13 at the time. She conducted herself very well. She was talking to a camera, in an interview, about the disappearance of her best friend at such a young age. And I don't know how nobody could have came forward after that and said, actually, this is what's happened, because her statement was quite moving. And the other side of it is the news of the world and the phone hacking scandals. And I'm sure you're well aware of this. If you're not in the UK, I'm not entirely sure how much of an international story this was, but basically the News of the World was one of the largest, if not the largest, newspapers in the UK, fronting up Fleet Street. And they employed various PIs, professional hackers, to hack into people's phones, including the phones of celebrities and famous people. They hacked into Millie Dowler's phone. And the reason this is important is because in the documentary explains it, so I don't want to go into too much detail because I think you need to watch the documentary to truly grasp kind of what was happening and the impact it had on this case. But long story short, watch the documentary for the details. I thoroughly recommend it. They hacked into her phone. It gave the family false hope that she was still alive. The documentary didn't go into too much detail about what impact this had on the police's kind of on their detecting and what they did with that information. It took them a little while to get that information, which was pathetic of the News of the World. Apparently it took a week. If you have important, crucial information, you give it to the police, because they were actually part of Millie's demise, basically. Maybe they started out with good intentions. They wanted to not just report on it, but to solve the case. Yeah, if they had solved the case and brought her home alive, even with the phone hacking scandal, I think probably the newspaper would still be here, because that would be an incredible thing to do. But I think the way the newspaper would be run would be quite different. But no, they played a detrimental part in this. And had that not happened, maybe the investigation would have taken a different turn. Who knows? It does look at the killer's activities surrounding the time. We actually get to hear from his ex-partner, who was the one who actually reported him to the police. This is the first time I've heard her speak out about this, and for me that was exceptionally interesting to hear what she had to say. It must have been very difficult for her at the time to learn that this abusive man, who was obviously supposed to love her, was also this violent murderer who had murdered several other girls. And the police said something quite chilling. I can't remember the detective's name. There were several detectives interviewed and speaking to the camera. One of them pointed out quite bluntly that if they didn't catch him, he would do it again. And that's terrifying. And I know it's obvious, if there's a serial killer on the loose, they will keep on killing. But the way she said the only thing to stop them is to catch them kind of makes it feel like they'll just keep on picking everybody up at random. The killer had a very specific MO and a very specific target. And it's just awful that Millie Dowler was in the wrong place at the wrong time. This documentary really does shed light for me on aspects of the case that I wasn't aware of or that I'd only ever kind of touched upon. Previously, I've seen maybe 3 or 4 documentaries that look at Millie Dowler's abduction, but usually they're focusing on the killer. This one looks a lot more at, well, first the phone hacking scandal and also interviews from the time and last seen footage and things. It's beautifully put together. Unfortunately, I haven't got the name of the production company. I can't find that information offhand. It will be in the closing credits, I'm sure. But it's brilliant, and you definitely need to watch it if you're interested in true crime. It's very sensitive. It's done very sensitively towards the family. At no point did I feel like it would have been an injustice. I didn't feel like they gave any glory to the killer. He's not even mentioned until... It's an hour-long documentary. I'd say he's maybe mentioned 40 minutes in, give or take. So, if for whatever reason you're only able to watch half of this, you'll never hear his name. Granted, I have already told you it, but it's a disgusting name and a disgusting man, and I don't think... I mean, he will never be released, but apparently he's petitioning for his parole, which is just barbaric. Like, don't be stupid, of course not. Fingers crossed, of course. It's an interesting case because it's not just about the murder of several girls, it's about the downfall of one of the biggest media outlets in the UK and the part they played. It's powerful, it's informative, it's entertaining as a documentary should be. It definitely kept me hooked and captivated. It gave me a lot of information that I didn't previously have. Maybe if you remember this case, you know, in television, I was 10, I have no memory of this happening at the time. You may already be very aware of a lot of this. But if not, I'd say it's a perfect example of how to tell a complete but concise story of a victim's demise. Of course, I wish the documentary didn't exist because I wish there was no reason for it to exist. Like everybody else, I wish Millie Dowler was still here. Sadly, of course, she's not. But since the documentary does exist, I'm pleased to say that it's pretty perfect and one that I would definitely suggest that you watch.